The neon lights of the downtown bar flickered gently as the evening crowd settled in. It was a quiet Thursday night, with a few patrons scattered around, sipping drinks and chatting softly. At the far end, a small gang of 3 men laughed loudly, the kind of energy that made the room feel tense. Through the entrance walked an elderly man. His posture was straight, calm, and purposeful. He wore a simple gray jacket over a t-shirt, dark jeans, and casual shoes. A low-brimmed cap shadowed part of his face, giving him an unassuming look. He moved slowly but confidently, nodding politely at the bartender as he approached. The gang noticed him immediately. They had been drinking and feeling untouchable, picking targets for their amusement. One of them, the tallest of the group, leaned back in his chair and smirked. "Look at this old guy," he sneered. "Bet he can't even handle a drink without spilling it." Chuck Norris, though the gang had no idea, did not flinch. He smiled politely, placing his order with a quiet voice that carried calm authority. His hands rested lightly on the counter, relaxed but ready. The bartender, recognizing the air of respect surrounding him, served him without a word. The gang's laughter grew louder. One of them even nudged his friend. "Hey, Grandpa, what's a man like you doing here? This isn't a retirement home." Chuck simply glanced over, a faint smile playing on his lips. He didn't respond with anger or sarcasm. He let their words hang in the air like smoke, unbothered, unshaken. His eyes were sharp, taking in every movement, every gesture, every subtle shift in the gang's body language. The patrons nearby sensed the tension rising. Something about this old man commanded attention, even if no one could quite place why. He didn't seem intimidating at all, yet there was an unmistakable calm in his presence that made people pause, leaning forward slightly to see what would happen next. And that's when the tallest thug stood up, clearly wanting to provoke him further. "Come on, old man. Show us you've got some fight in you," he taunted, laughing loudly, thinking he was daring a harmless elder. Chuck Norris took a slow sip of his drink. His calm, steady gaze met the thug's eyes. No one in the bar realized it yet, but the night was about to take an unexpected turn. No one expected what happened next. The tallest thug leaned on the bar, grinning as if he owned the place. His friends snickered behind him, echoing his bravado. "Come on, old man. Don't just sit there sipping your drink. Talk to us. Show us what you've got." Chuck Norris remained calm. He set his glass down carefully, his fingers steady, his movements deliberate. He didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he looked at the gang with a quiet composure that made the bar feel slightly smaller, the air heavier. "You don't have to do this," Chuck said softly, his voice smooth, controlled, yet carrying an unmistakable authority. The gang laughed, clearly dismissing his words. One of them, a shorter man with tattoos snaking up his arms, stepped closer. "What? You gonna tell us to leave? You some kind of old man with a plan?" he jeered. His smirk widened. "We run this bar, Grandpa. And you? You're just another target." The bar patrons exchanged uneasy glances. Phones subtly came out from pockets, some instinctively recording, sensing that something unusual was about to happen. A young couple at the corner whispered nervously, "Who even is he? Why's everyone staring?" Chuck Norris didn't react to their words. He stayed seated, back straight, shoulders relaxed. But his eyes scanned the gang, noting the tension in their movements, the predictable mistakes they were making as they tried to intimidate him. He wasn't preparing for a fight. He was already assessing it. The tallest thug laughed and shoved Chuck lightly on the shoulder. "Hey, you don't look so tough, old man. You sure you're not lost?" Chuck's hand barely moved as he caught the thug's wrist, holding it firmly but without aggression. "I'm right where I need to be," he said, calmly releasing him. The thug stumbled slightly, surprised at the restraint and subtle power behind the movement. The bar fell quiet for a brief moment. Some patrons shifted in their seats, sensing that this was no ordinary confrontation. Chuck's calm demeanor didn't just deflate the gang, it commanded respect. The gang wasn't done yet. The tallest thug leaned closer, almost in Chuck's face now. "You got some nerve, huh? Talking to us like that. We'll teach you some manners," he spat, thinking the old man could be bullied into submission. Chuck Norris simply smiled. "Respect is earned, not demanded. And no one here is above respect." His voice, though soft, resonated with authority. The gang blinked, momentarily thrown off, but quickly laughed it off, refusing to believe an elderly man could challenge them. That's when Chuck made a subtle movement, a small shift in his weight, almost imperceptible, a fraction of a second that hinted at precision. One of the gang members reached for a bottle, intending to intimidate further. Chuck's hand rested lightly on the bar, his eyes fixed on the man. Before anyone could react, Chuck leaned back slightly, letting the thug's own momentum cause him to stumble forward. It wasn't violence. It was precision, control, and skill hidden in calm movements. The bar gasped. Phones came up faster now. Everyone wanted to see what this elderly man would do next. Have you ever seen someone underestimated because of their age? Comment below which country or city you're watching this from. The gang, frustrated, tried to regain composure. The tallest thug shouted, "Old man, you better show us some fight. Don't think we're scared." Chuck Norris didn't raise his voice. He simply stood, slowly, deliberately, making sure to maintain balance and control. The subtle power in his posture caused a few patrons to instinctively take a step back. The gang could feel it, a silent presence that radiated skill, confidence, and authority, even without a single punch thrown. The youngest member of the gang, a wiry kid with messy hair, whispered nervously to his friends, Do you feel that? Something's off." The tallest thug barked a laugh, trying to regain dominance. But deep down, even he noticed the old man's calm, unshakable stance. Chuck's eyes didn't glare, they observed. They read every twitch, every shift, every subtle tension in the gang's bodies. And the gang didn't realize it yet, but they were no longer in control. The bar went silent as Chuck finally spoke again, his voice steady. "You can continue this display, or you can leave with your dignity intact. The choice is yours." The gang froze. None of them expected words like that. Not from a man who looked so harmless. Some of the patrons whispered excitedly to one another, their phones recording every second. "Who is this guy?" they murmured. But Chuck didn't flaunt his identity. He didn't need to. The presence, the calm, the quiet control, it was enough to turn the tide. And that was the moment the gang realized, too late, that the night wouldn't go the way they expected. The old man they had tried to bully was no ordinary senior. The gang thought they were in control, but they had no idea what was coming. The gang's laughter had grown louder, more obnoxious, as if the bar itself belonged to them. They circled Chuck Norris, thinking they had found an easy target. He remained seated at the bar, calm, sipping his drink, eyes scanning every movement with the precision of a seasoned fighter. "Hey, old man," the tallest thug sneered, slamming his hand on the counter. "You think sitting there and smiling makes you tough? Stand up. Let's see what you've got." Chuck didn't rise immediately. He set his glass down deliberately, his fingers brushing the edge in a motion so smooth it seemed almost ceremonial. He slowly turned to face them, his expression serene yet commanding. "I don't need to prove anything to you," he said, his voice low but firm. "But I won't let anyone disrespect me either." The gang exchanged glances. Their confidence faltered just slightly, enough for Chuck to notice. One of the smaller members, trying to appear bold, reached forward to shove him. Chuck caught the man's wrist in a motion so fluid that it barely seemed like he'd moved. The thug yelped in surprise as Chuck gently redirected him away without applying force, leaving the man off balance on his own momentum. The bar went silent. Patrons leaned forward, phones raised, capturing every detail. Whispers spread. "Did you see that? Who is this guy?" The tallest thug's face reddened. He shoved a chair against Chuck's legs. "Enough games, old man. You're making us look stupid." Chuck didn't flinch. He rose to his feet slowly, deliberately, giving no hint of rush or panic. His body radiated controlled power, movement precise, energy calm, but undeniably threatening. The gang laughed nervously, though their bravado was starting to crack. "You don't need to scare me," Chuck said. "I'm not here to fight anyone. But if you continue this, you will learn respect." The gang didn't take him seriously. One of them grabbed a bottle from a nearby table, holding it like a weapon. "Maybe this will help you understand, old man," he sneered. He swung it, aiming for Chuck's side. Chuck shifted his weight just slightly, the bottle passing harmlessly as if it had missed by inches. Not a word was spoken, not a single unnecessary movement. The control was mesmerizing, almost supernatural to the watching patrons. The thug stumbled forward, his own clumsiness betraying him, while Chuck remained entirely composed. At that moment, A young couple in the corner whispered to each other. There's something about him. He's no ordinary man. Look at the way he moves, like he knows exactly what's coming. The gang grew more aggressive, frustration building. The tallest thug shoved Chuck squarely on the chest, thinking he could overpower an old man. But Chuck simply absorbed the force, standing his ground with perfect balance. His calm, commanding presence made it impossible for the gang to feel in control. Chuck finally spoke, eyes locking onto the tallest thugs. You can continue to act without respect, or you can step back and choose dignity. It's your choice. The bar went completely silent. Patrons were on edge. Phones were out, recording every subtle movement. Even the bartender stopped mid-pour, sensing something extraordinary unfolding. The gang, however, wasn't finished. They cornered him, mocking and yelling, pushing boundaries further. Chuck didn't retaliate physically. He stayed composed, letting their anger rise while his own control and focus grew. If you were in Chuck's shoes, surrounded by bullies, what would you do? Comment below and let us know. One of the thugs, growing impatient, swung a punch. Chuck shifted his body slightly, avoiding it with ease, leaving the thug off balance. The rest of the gang froze, eyes wide, realizing too late that the man they had underestimated was extraordinary. The tension was palpable. Every patron leaned forward, anticipating the moment when Chuck would finally reveal his true skill. But he remained calm, almost meditative, his eyes scanning, assessing, waiting for the right moment. The gang's bravado had begun to crumble, replaced with confusion and fear. They had thought themselves untouchable, ready to bully a harmless old man. But Chuck's calm, measured responses, his subtle mastery over every movement, were slowly dismantling their confidence. The bar's atmosphere shifted. What had started as a rowdy confrontation now felt like a standoff with a master, someone who could end the fight before it even began. Chuck wasn't just defending himself. He was teaching a lesson without striking a single blow. And that's when the patrons, finally realizing the depth of the situation, leaned forward in unison, murmuring, "Who is this man? He's amazing, old, but powerful." The gang had no idea what was coming next, and that realization alone would be their first warning. The gang thought they were in control, but Chuck had been waiting for the right moment. The bar had grown tense. Patrons leaned forward in their seats, watching every movement with bated breath. Chuck Norris, still calm and composed, didn't raise his voice or act aggressively. Yet there was a silent weight to his presence that made even the rowdiest of the gang hesitate. The tallest thug, frustrated and red-faced, stomped toward Chuck, swinging a fist as if to intimidate. Chuck simply shifted his stance slightly, barely noticeable, but the movement was precise, calculated. The punch missed its mark entirely, leaving the thug stumbling forward, off balance, and momentarily shocked. The other gang members froze. They were beginning to sense something wasn't right. How did he? Muttered the wiry one with tattoos. They whispered to each other, trying to mask their growing unease. Chuck, still serene, adjusted his position, making sure to stay in control without striking. His movements were minimal, but they carried the unmistakable confidence of someone who had mastered their body, their mind, and their environment. The subtle shifts, the way he absorbed force, the precision of every small motion, it all hinted at a skill far beyond their understanding. One of the bar patrons, a young man with a phone in his hand, whispered to his friend, "Did you see that? He didn't even move, and the punch completely missed him. Who is this guy?" The gang, desperate to regain their composure, began circling Chuck like predators trying to intimidate prey. They pushed chairs and shouted threats, their bravado trying to cover their growing uncertainty. Chuck's calm gaze didn't waver. His eyes, sharp and calculating, followed every movement, every twitch, every subtle signal the gang members made. Then came a small, almost imperceptible demonstration. One of the gang members swung a bottle again, hoping to catch Chuck off guard. Chuck didn't flinch violently, didn't lunge. He shifted his weight just enough to redirect the attack, letting the thug's own momentum cause him to stagger slightly. Not a sound escaped Chuck's lips, not a sudden move. Yet the precision and control were unmistakable. The patrons gasped quietly. Phones raised higher, capturing the subtle but undeniable display. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Who is this man? He's incredible." Even the bartender paused mid-pour, mesmerized by the demonstration. The tallest thug, growing angry, stomped closer, trying to regain the illusion of dominance. "You think you're clever, huh? You're just an old man," he barked. Chuck tilted his head slightly, a faint smile forming on his lips. "Old, perhaps," he said calmly, "but not powerless." The gang scoffed, thinking it was just arrogance. But the way Chuck moved, small shifts of weight, subtle adjustments to stance, effortless balance, was something they couldn't comprehend. He wasn't attacking, yet he wasn't defenseless. Every minor interaction, every gentle deflection, hinted at the decades of discipline, training, and experience behind it. A young woman near the bar whispered in awe to her friend, "He's like a master. You can feel it. He's not just old, he's untouchable." The gang, growing increasingly frustrated, made their next move. The wiry one lunged with a reckless punch, attempting to catch Chuck off guard. Chuck stepped aside with perfect timing, letting the man stumble past him, regaining balance effortlessly without showing any strain. The movement was so controlled, so precise, that it seemed almost impossible for a man his age. Patrons were now openly murmuring, some leaning over the bar to get a better view. The gang exchanged anxious glances. Their confidence had been eroded. Every minor misstep of theirs seemed to amplify Chuck's subtle control. Chuck's calm demeanor and silent skill sent a clear message. He was not just any man. He was someone who had mastered the art of anticipation, restraint, and precision. The gang might have thought they were toying with a harmless old man, but the bar, and everyone in it, was beginning to understand the truth. The gang still had no idea who they were dealing with, but soon, they would learn the hard way. The tension in the bar had reached its breaking point. Patrons leaned forward in their seats, silent but fully alert, as the gang realized that the old man they had mocked and bullied was unlike anyone they had ever encountered. Chuck Norris, still calm, had been letting them escalate, observing their weaknesses and maintaining perfect control over the situation. The tallest thug, red-faced with anger, slammed his fist on the counter. "Enough," he shouted. "You think you can just sit there and humiliate us with silence? Stand up and fight if you have the guts." Chuck Norris finally rose to his feet. His movements were deliberate, smooth, and measured. Each step he took radiated confidence. The air seemed to thrum with quiet power as he faced the gang. His calm presence alone made the gang hesitate. It wasn't fear, it was awe. Even the rowdiest patrons had gone silent, sensing the shift in energy. "You've been testing me all night," Chuck said, his voice low and controlled, carrying authority without aggression. "And now, it's time you understand respect." The gang laughed nervously, masking the unease growing within them. One of them swung a bottle again, hoping to provoke a reaction. Chuck, with a subtle step to the side and a gentle redirection of the thug's momentum, made the attack fail spectacularly. The man stumbled forward, almost crashing into a table. Not a single punch had been thrown. The patrons gasped in unison, their phones recording every moment. The tallest thug, furious and desperate to maintain dominance, lunged at Chuck with a swing aimed at his torso. Chuck sidestepped with fluid precision, guiding the thug past him, leaving him unbalanced and exposed. His movements were so effortless that it seemed as if the thug had moved himself, not Chuck. Every action was precise, calculated, and nonviolent, a demonstration of skill so refined it was mesmerizing. The remaining gang members froze, confusion and fear replacing their bravado. Chuck didn't strike. He didn't raise his voice. He simply moved with perfect control, using their own aggression against them. The air was thick with tension, the room silent except for the occasional gasp or muttered whisper. "Violence isn't necessary when you understand balance," Chuck said calmly, addressing the gang. "Your anger only works against you, and your disrespect will not be tolerated." The gang's leader stumbled again, trying to regain his composure. "Old man, He stopped, unsure how to continue. All his bluster had evaporated in the presence of Chuck's quiet mastery. The subtle precision, the control, the complete lack of panic, it was overwhelming. Chuck continued, his eyes locking on each of them in turn. "No one earns authority through fear or intimidation. Respect is given through action and integrity. And tonight, you've chosen the wrong path." The youngest gang member, visibly shaking, whispered to his friends, "I think I think he's teaching us a lesson. Chuck's calm, measured demonstration of skill was now fully evident. He moved only when necessary, every gesture precise, every reaction calculated. It was a display of martial arts mastery so refined that it left the gang humiliated without a single strike landing. The patrons began murmuring among themselves, recognizing the extraordinary power hidden within the old man. The tallest thug sank into his chair, deflated, realizing the truth too late. He and his companions had underestimated someone who had dedicated his life to discipline, skill, and control. Chuck Norris didn't need to fight them with aggression. He had already won the battle by demonstrating mastery, confidence, and restraint. Who is this mysterious man? Even without throwing a punch, he has humbled the gang completely. Chuck took a slow step back, gesturing subtly for the gang to calm down. Leave now, he said quietly but firmly. And remember what respect looks like. The gang, fully humiliated and shaken, muttered apologies and hastily left the bar. Patrons erupted into quiet applause, some still holding their phones, capturing the awe-inspiring moment. Chuck's calm, unassuming demeanor had transformed the encounter from potential violence into a lesson on discipline, humility, and strength. And while Chuck hadn't revealed his identity yet, the murmurs among the crowd began. He's no ordinary man. He's a legend. The gang thought they were untouchable, but soon everyone would know exactly who they had tried to bully. The bar had grown quiet. Even the patrons who had been nervously watching now leaned forward in disbelief. Chuck Norris had demonstrated his mastery without raising his voice, without throwing a single decisive strike. But the message had been clear. He was not to be trifled with. The gang huddled together in a corner, whispering among themselves, trying to regain their composure. The tallest thug ran a hand through his hair, sweat glistening on his brow. I don't understand. How did he? Before he could finish, a young bartender, who had been watching closely the entire time, spoke up. You really don't know who you're dealing with, do you? His voice carried a mixture of awe and incredulity. What are you talking about? The gang's leader spat. The bartender pointed subtly toward Chuck. That's Chuck Norris. Legendary martial artist, retired instructor, film star. This is the man whose skills are the stuff of legends. The words spread instantly through the bar. Patrons began murmuring, recognizing the name, piecing it together. No way. That's Chuck Norris, whispered one of the regulars. Phones were raised higher, the recording now capturing not just skill, but history in motion. The gang froze. Their bravado evaporated in an instant. They had thought they were intimidating an old man. Instead, they had been mocking a living legend. Faces turned pale, eyes wide. The tallest thug stumbled backward, tripping over a chair as if gravity itself had shifted beneath him. Chuck Norris remained calm. He didn't raise his voice or gloat. Instead, he offered a quiet, measured smile. I didn't need to prove who I am, he said softly, addressing the gang without malice. You underestimated me because of age. You underestimated me because you thought appearances defined power. Let this be a lesson. The gang members looked at each other, shame and fear evident in every glance. We didn't know, stammered the youngest one. His bravado was gone. He looked like a child caught in the wrong. Chuck shook his head slowly. Ignorance is no excuse for disrespect. Learn from this. Respect is earned, not demanded. And it should be given to everyone, regardless of age, appearance, or strength. The patrons erupted into applause. Phones captured every word, every subtle gesture, every look of quiet authority. The bar was alive with murmurs of admiration. Chuck had not only demonstrated physical mastery, but moral and ethical strength as well. One of the gang members, his pride completely shattered, muttered, I'm sorry. Chuck nodded, his expression firm but forgiving. Apologies are meaningless without understanding. Remember the lesson. The young bartender whispered to a patron nearby. He doesn't need to fight to make people respect him. That's why he's legendary. Even the bar owner, who had been nervously watching the chaos, approached Chuck. Sir, thank you. You didn't have to do that, but you handled it perfectly. Chuck nodded, his calm aura unaffected by the praise. The patrons were now buzzing with excitement. Phones and social media feeds would soon carry this story far beyond the bar's walls. Chuck Norris, with humility and discipline, had transformed what could have been a violent encounter into a powerful lesson on respect, patience, and skill. The gang, now fully humbled, quietly made their way to the exit. Their previous arrogance had been replaced by shock and awe. The lesson had been delivered not through anger, but through control, mastery, and wisdom. How would you react if you were disrespected like that? Comment below and share your thoughts. As Chuck returned to his seat, the bar's atmosphere shifted from fear to admiration. Patrons whispered excitedly to one another, recounting the subtle yet precise movements, the calm authority, and the undeniable skill of the man who had been quietly observing them all. It was a moment of revelation, not just of identity, but of the quiet power that comes with discipline and experience. Chuck Norris had reminded everyone in that bar, and anyone who would later watch the videos, that true strength is a combination of skill, patience, and integrity. The gang had been humbled, the crowd inspired, and the story was just beginning to go viral. The events at the bar didn't stay there for long. Within minutes, videos captured by patrons' phones began circulating on social media. The quiet, unassuming man who had humbly handled the gang's bullying, Chuck Norris, was now being recognized worldwide. Clips of his calm yet commanding presence, his precise movements, and the gang's complete humiliation spread like wildfire. News outlets and martial arts forums picked up the footage. Comments poured in from around the globe. Incredible restraint. That's real power. He didn't even need to fight, and yet he humbled them completely. This is a masterclass in discipline and humility. Chuck's actions sparked conversations about respect, patience, and the true meaning of strength. Back at the bar, patrons were still buzzing. Phones were everywhere, sharing clips, tagging friends, and recording their own reactions. "I can't believe we just witnessed that," one patron murmured. He handled it all without raising his voice. The gang, meanwhile, had scattered, humiliated, and deeply aware of their mistake. The tallest thug had called his friends repeatedly, trying to explain, but it was no use. Their arrogance had been exposed, their ignorance laid bare by a man who had taught them respect without delivering a single punch. Chuck, seated calmly at the bar, smiled faintly as the crowd continued to murmur. He didn't gloat. He didn't boast. He allowed the moment to be a lesson, not for himself, but for everyone watching, including those who had underestimated him. Every movement, every word, every measured action had carried a message. Strength is not about aggression. It is about discipline, awareness, and humility. The story quickly gained traction online. Clips were shared across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Influencers highlighted Chuck's calm mastery and moral authority, describing it as a perfect example of true power and restraint. Martial artists analyzed his subtle movements, noting how decades of experience allowed him to control the situation without inflicting harm. If you believe no one should be judged by appearance or age, type respect in the comments. Discussions flourished. Debates about bullying, respect, and the wisdom of age dominated comment sections. People from every corner of the world shared personal stories of underestimating others based on looks or age, drawing inspiration from Chuck's example. The viral clips weren't just entertainment. They became a movement, a conversation about dignity and courage. The gang, now fully aware of the global attention, faced the consequences of their actions. Some were publicly shamed on social media. Others were confronted privately by friends and family about their behavior. But Chuck never sought revenge. He had turned the encounter into a universal lesson, showing that humility and integrity could achieve far more than force or intimidation. Patrons at the bar, now fully relaxed, raised their glasses in silent respect. Some laughed nervously, others shook their heads in awe. "We just witnessed a legend in action," one whispered, looking around to make sure everyone else felt the same. And as Chuck left the bar that night, the neon lights casting long shadows across the empty street, the message lingered in the minds of everyone present, and in millions of viewers around the world. True strength is measured not by how hard you hit, but by how wisely you act. If you were inspired by Chuck Norris' calm courage and mastery, type respect in the comments and subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. The incident became more than just a viral video. It became a lesson, a symbol, and a reminder that age, appearance, or intimidation cannot define a person. Chuck Norris had not only defended himself with skill and restraint, but he had also educated the world on the power of respect, humility, and mastery. In a world that often values aggression over wisdom, arrogance over discipline, Chuck Norris reminded everyone that the quiet, steady presence of experience and integrity could command respect and leave a lasting impact without raising a single unnecessary hand. And for millions watching online, the message was clear. Strength without humility is empty, but humility with skill can move the world.